Hello, everyone. This is the CircuitPython weekly meeting for February 18th, 2025. It's the time of the week where we get together to talk about all things CircuitPython. My name is Tim, and I'm sponsored by Adafruit to work on CircuitPython. CircuitPython is a version of Python that is designed to run on tiny computers called microcontrollers. Lost my place here. There we are. CircuitPython development is primarily sponsored by Adafruit. So if you want to support Adafruit and CircuitPython, consider purchasing hardware from them at adafruit.com. As usual, this meeting does get hosted on the Adafruit Discord server. You can join that at any time by going to adafru.it/discord. We hold the meeting in the CircuitPython dev text channel, as well as the CircuitPython voice channel. The meeting typically occurs on Mondays at 2 p.m. U.S. Eastern or 11 a.m. Pacific time, except when that coincides with a U.S. holiday, as it did this week. And in the event that it does, like it did this week, then we typically bump it to Tuesday, which is why we are gathered here today on a Tuesday. I did not remember to check the calendar, but if memory serves, I believe we are back on the normal day next week of Monday. Let's see here. Yes, as a reminder, if you would like to speak, you need the CircuitPythonistas rollover on Discord. So if you want to participate in the meeting and you don't already have that, just mention something over in that CircuitPython text channel, and we'll get you hooked up with that so that you can talk during the meeting. There is a shared notes document that accompanies the meeting and recording. You can contribute to that document beforehand. The final notes document includes timestamps to go along with the video, so you can use the doc to skip around and view parts of the video that interest you most. The meeting tends to run 30 to 60 minutes. After each meeting, we'll post a link to the next meeting's notes document in the CircuitPython dev channel on Discord. So you can check the pinned messages there throughout the week to always find the notes doc for the upcoming meeting. If you want to participate but can't attend, that's no problem either. You can just leave your notes for hug reports or status updates in that document, and the host will read them for you during the meeting. And with that, I will tell you a bit about the structure. The meeting is held in 5 parts. The first part will be community news. That's going to be a look at all things CircuitPython and Python on hardware in the community. It's a chosen set of items from the Python on Microcontrollers newsletter. The second part is the state of CircuitPython, the libraries, and Blinka. That one is a quantitative overview of the entire project. It's a chance to look at the project by the numbers, separate from our status updates. Next up, and the first of our 2 round robins, is the Hug Report section. Hug Reports is an opportunity to highlight the good things folks are doing, so you can take a moment to recognize awesome folks in our community. Next up is Status Updates. That's our second round robin. During Status Updates, that one is an opportunity to report on what you've been up to, so you can take a couple of minutes, tell us what you've been doing since the last meeting, and what you'll be up to over the next week until the next meeting. Following that is In the Weeds. That one is an opportunity for some more long-form discussions. Those can either come out of status updates, or they can be topics identified ahead of time as being too long for status updates. And so those are good if you have in-depth questions or conversations that you'd like to have. And again, those are down at the bottom of the notes. You can stick topics in there as we go or throughout the week, and then we will discuss them when the time comes for the Weeds section. So that covers how the meeting will go. Next up, we will get started with community news after I scroll a little bit here and take the first timestamp. There it is. Yes, community news. So, sorry about that. Okay. Not sure what the first bullet point is here, but there we go. So, all these items come from the Python on Hardware newsletter. All these items and many more are available in that newsletter, which gets mailed out on Mondays. I'll tell you a bit more about that at the conclusion of the items, but the items I selected this week, first up is, next, let me get that, there it is, the Python, MicroPython and CircuitPython, Similarities and Differences. That's the title of a post that was written by Don Welcher over on, published by DigiKey. So this is a great resource. If we always have folks asking about the differences between these things. So this is another great written out resource, kind of answering those questions, explaining the comparisons, the difference, why each came to be and when they came to be, and different basic stuff like that. So it's a good read and a good place, I think, to point folks who are just starting out their journey and trying to figure out what's what with Python on hardware. Next up, we have a video from about certifying open source hardware. This one is Michael Weinberg, presented 10 years of certifying open source hardware at FOSDEM 2025. There are links here to Blue Sky for a post about this, and as well as a video. It's about 20 minutes long. I have not watched it yet, but I've got it queued up to watch later on today. Looks pretty cool. Next up, we have Gustavo Reynaga, inspiring the next generation of makers with MicroPython. If you're a fan of open source technology, Gustavo Salvador Reynaga Aguilar, my apologies if I messed up any of the names there, is a name to know. An experienced educator with a passion for technology, Reynaga has spent nearly 3 decades teaching and inspiring students at CEC ATI 132 in Mexico. He works with platforms like Arduino, Raspberry Pi, and BeagleBone. There's a link here to a nice blog post published by Arduino about Gustavo, and there is a link in that blog post as well, I saw, to some open source materials hosted on GitHub that are some good introduction to MicroPython materials written in Spanish, which is pretty cool as well. We can keep that around for our Spanish-speaking friends who are trying to get into MicroPython. Next up, and I think, this is the last one I grabbed from the newsletter this week. This one caught my eye as an open source password manager. There's a picture of it here if you'd like to see it in the notes doc. This is a Password Vault 2.x. It's an open source password manager based on the Raspberry Pi Pico 2 and a small display with buttons. It's implemented in CircuitPython, and there are links here to Hackster.io and GitHub. This project basically feels like it was designed to catch my attention, being a display I/O interface on CircuitPython with some crypto nerd stuff inside. So I was having fun looking through the source code to this, and I think it's a nice little interface that I wanted to highlight in the newsletter this week. So yes, all of those items and many more were in the Python on Microcontrollers weekly newsletter, which is a CircuitPython community-run newsletter that gets emailed every Monday. The complete archives are available at adafruitdaily.com. It highlights the latest Python on hardware-related news from around the web, including CircuitPython, Python, and MicroPython developments. To contribute your own news or projects, you can edit next week's draft on GitHub, submitting a pull request with your changes, or you can also email cpnews@adafruit.com or tag a post with hashtag CircuitPython on Mastodon, Blue Sky, or X. And as always, thanks to Anne for curating all of the great stories that we see each week in the newsletter. All right, so next up we have the state of CircuitPython, the libraries, and Blinka. This is a quantitative overview of the entire project. Gives us a chance to look at the health of the project separate from our status updates. We'll talk about the project overall first, and then separately discuss the core, the libraries, and Blinka. So first up, I will take a timestamp and tell you about the overall stats this week. In the past 7 days, which is important to note, this is a 7-day report, and as we are bumped to Tuesday this week for our meeting, it does mean that we technically do lose 1 day of stats. So if you contributed this week and you don't see your name in here, we do apologize for that, and we appreciate your contribution nonetheless. But yeah, we've got 7 days of stats here. So going back to last Tuesday, we have 20 pull requests overall that were merged across all the projects. There were 9 different authors there. I did not go through and bold names, so let me try to say on the fly here the names that are less familiar or less recent to my eye. This week were D. Astles, Matt Tuna 15, Randall Sharp, and I think the others here I see a little bit more regularly on these lists, so thanks to them as well. But those names that I just mentioned are folks who might be newer or less frequent contributors, so thanks to them for getting involved or getting back involved in the CircuitPython world. We had 6 reviewers, thanks to Liz, Lady Ada, Scott, Dan, Jeff, and myself. We had 15 issues closed. by 6 different people, with 18 issues opened up by 13 people. So we are net up just a little bit there, but also working through closing some issues too. Next up, I will pass it over to Scott to tell us about the core for the week.
Hey, Tim. So for the core, we had 12 pull requests merged from 7 different authors. Thank you to Matt Tuna and Randall Sharp and Babluck B, who are infrequent on the core. We currently had 3 reviewers, Dan, myself, and Jeff. We have 23 open pull requests, which is comfortably under our goal of 25, which is a single page. Many of those are new, although maybe 10 are kind of old and probably languishing, so check those out. Issues-wise, we had 3 closed issues by 2 people and 12 opened by 8, so we're up a lot. We're up 9 for a total of 762 open issues. At the time, one of this was not assigned a milestone, but we use milestones to triage, so we're up to date, I think, basically with triaging. We have 10 open issues for 9.2x and 59 open issues for 9xx, so those are kind of like top priority. And then the big things coming in CircuitPython 10 are marked by 18 open issues for 10.0. That's it for the core.
All right, thanks, Scott. Next up, I will tell you about the libraries. So this section covers both Adafruit libraries and community libraries over in the community bundle. Right now, we have 352 libraries in the Adafruit bundle and 154 libraries in the community bundle, which gives us a total currently of 506 libraries. In the past 7 days, we had 8 pull requests merged by 3 different authors. We had 5 reviewers, so thank you to our reviewers. Of the pull requests that were merged, most of them were on the newer side. The oldest one was at 35 days. The newest several were down at 1 day. That leaves us with 54 pull requests open now. The oldest one of those is a draft that's at 915 days, so getting up there. And then the newest one, as usual, is just 1 day old. There were 12 issues closed by 4 people, with 6 new issues opened up by 6 people, so we're net down a bit issues-wise on libraries, and that leaves us with 685 open issues across all the libraries, and there are currently 3 of those that are labeled as good first issues, which you can find listed over at circuitpython.org/contributing, which is a website where you should head if you are interested in getting involved in CircuitPython. In particular, the things you'll find there are a list of open PRs and open issues. The place where we tend to point folks who want to get involved first is that list of open PRs. On that page again, circuitpython.org/contributing. You scroll through that list, take a look through there, find something that you are interested in or that you've got the hardware for or some kind of knowledge about, and you can click through to GitHub. And these represent PRs. So someone has submitted some code to resolve some issue or add some new feature or something like that, and it is waiting for someone to come along and review that change, and that could be you if you would like it to be. So take a look over the code, review it for spelling, syntax, logic errors, anything like that. If you do have the hardware and you're able to go ahead and actually try it on the hardware, then do that as well. Leave a comment letting us know what you found when you looked in the code. If you did have the hardware and ran it, let us know how that went in your comment there. If you get comfortable with that process and would like to get leveled up to leave official reviews on GitHub, we can work with you to make that happen as well. If you want to start getting your hands dirty doing coding instead of reviewing, at the same webpage mentioned before, circuitpython.org/contributing, along the top, you can click over to issues where you'll find a similar list of links to GitHub, but these ones represent issues, so they do not have a proposed change yet. They're waiting for someone like you to come along and actually submit some code to resolve a particular problem or implement some new feature or add a new example or what have you. So similarly, you can kind of look through this list, find something that is interesting to you or that you've got the hardware for, click through to GitHub, but this time what you would be doing is actually submitting your own PR with the change to resolve that issue. We have a guide for contributing to Git using Git and GitHub. So if you have trouble with the version control, we can point you towards resources there. We also have folks who are around on Discord who are more than happy to help get you started. So if you would like to contribute to CircuitPython, be it reviewing or submitting, and you're having trouble with any part of the process, please just come say hi on Discord. Let us know what you're up to and what trouble you're having, and there will be folks who are very happy to help you out. We want everyone to be able to contribute, no matter what your background or skill level or anything else like that is. So we're happy to have folks come who want to contribute, even if they need help. The library updates in the last 7 days are listed here in the notes doc. I will mention the new library this week is the analog clock one, which was just recently released and added to the bundle. There are a list of updated ones here, which I won't read, but you can, of course, find those in the docs if you're interested. And with that, I will take the next timestamp and pass it over to Jeff, who has volunteered to tell us about Blinka this week.
Hello there. So Blinka is a compatibility layer that lets you run your CircuitPython code on a bunch of single board computers, including the Raspberry Pi, as well as on MicroPython. And it was a quiet week on Blinka this week with no pull requests merged, leaving 19 open pull requests. Issues-wise, it was quiet again with 0 issues open and closed, leaving 126 open issues. The number of supported boards stands at 146. Those are the statistics reported by Adabot, but I have a couple of little updates. I did just merge that newest pull request in. I'd reviewed it last week, and we didn't find any problems, so I went ahead and merged that in. And we've got some newer repositories that I've been working in that are not checked by Adabot and included in this report. And I just entered a pull request that hopefully, once that's merged, it will report on those new repositories that have to do with some Pi 5 specific functionality. Right, and that's the news with Blinka. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeff. And next up is the Hug Reports section. So I'll take a timestamp for that, tell you about it. Hug Reports is our chance to highlight folks in the CircuitPython community and beyond for doing awesome things. I'll start, then we'll go down the list alphabetically or as they appear in the notes doc. If you're text only or missing the meeting, then I'll read your notes when we get to them in the list. Otherwise, I will pass it off to you to read. So I will take the first timestamp and kick us off. My Hug Reports this week, thanks to Paul Cutler for interviewing me for the CircuitPython show and editing together a great episode of the podcast from it. It is scheduled for release on the 21st of April, and there, I'm sure, will be lots of other great episodes between now and then. Thanks to Scott, generally, just for doing the deep dive streams. I really appreciate you doing those and being willing to work in public. Also, more specifically this week, for talking through some ideas around different ways to implement emoji. Thanks to Liz for guidance on writing Learn Guides and for answering all of my many questions. And then outside the community, but thanks to Serenity OS project, they're another open source project for publishing their emoji font and images and making it easy for other folks to use. I think that's really cool of them. Next up, I will send it over to Dan, and Jeff is up after that.
Okay, thanks. I want to thank Tyeth and Just Mobilize, that's Justin, who tested a new release of the Nina FW firmware for airlifts. That was very helpful, and so it's now released, and I'll talk about that more later. And that's it.
Excellent. Thanks, Dan. Next up is Jeff, and after that is Jerry.
Hello, I've got a couple of Hug Reports today. First, I want to thank Michael Bell on GitHub and Mastodon for a pretty cool library called DVHSTX. It is an interface for the HSTX video output peripheral on the RP2350, and I've been able to use that for some Arduino work that I'm doing for Adafruit. Next up, thank you to Cooper for helping out with some audio work in the core that should have fallen to me, and for asking some questions so that I could clarify my thinking. Thank you, Scott, for helping one of my pull requests be better than it was at the outset. You always challenge me to do things a little better, and that's good. I appreciate that. And finally, somebody, I don't know exactly who, at Adafruit, for implementing an Atom feed in the Adafruit playground. I just added that link to my favorite feed readers electronics folder, and now I will not fall behind on stuff posted to the Adafruit playground. And those are my Hug reports for the week.
All right, thank you, Jeff. That is good to know. I didn't know about that. I'll have to add that to my reader as well. Next up is Jerry, and then we'll round it out with Scott after that. But hear from Jerry.
Hi, excuse me. Yeah, group hug first of all, and a note. I think the name is Sam Blenny for a couple of guides in the playground, and my cat for using Zephyr. They were easy to follow and worked very nicely.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jerry. Next up, and rounding out the Hug reports, we will hear from Scott.
Thank you, Tim. All right. First, a hug to TAC for debugging PIO USB host. I'm excited to try it with the fixes. And also to you, Foamy Guy, for experimenting with emoji support in CircuitPython. I do want to get back to it, and I want to talk with you if you have thoughts about it, too.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to chat. All right, that is it for Hug reports. So next up is status updates. This is the other of our round robin sections. This is our time to tell folks what we've been up to individually. I'll start, and then we'll go through the list of updates alphabetically. When I call on you, take a couple of minutes to tell us what you've been doing since the last meeting and what you anticipate you'll be getting up to until the next meeting. If a discussion becomes too long for status updates, we can always drop it down to in the weeds to discuss it a bit more later on. So I will take the first timestamp and get us kicked off. Last week I wrote some generic USB gamepad mapping code. It works on the Feather RP2040 USB host device, the one with the built-in USB port, and it just prints out the data that is sent by the controller whenever any buttons are pressed or the joysticks are used. So it's very basic, but it will help you figure out which buttons map to which data so you can then use them in the rest of your projects. This will ultimately find its way into a Learn guide, but for now I've completed just the code. Along the same vein, I did add support for USB HID gamepads to the game controls library, which is a library that abstracts away the controls so that you can write a game without worrying about what specific hardware the controls are. Next up, I have been working on the guide pages for the Metro RP2350. And then over this past weekend, I hacked together a label-like class for display.io that can render emoji in addition to text. It's quite limited, and there's been no thought given towards efficiency in its implementation, but it does render mixed text and emoji, which I was pretty excited to see. In the process of working on that, I found and reported an issue with image load that caused it to crash with certain images based on their size and the number of colors they use in the palette, and submitted a fix for that as well. And then I have observed a different issue where some of the images don't look right when they get rendered, some of the emoji images specifically, just how I found this, but I don't know the root cause yet. I need to dive a bit further into that to figure it out. But if anyone does get to using this and finds those or has any ideas about what could be up there, I am all ears on that front. So next up, we will hear from Dan, and then after that is Jeff.
Okay, as I mentioned, I released a new version of the Nina FW firmware for Airlift coprocessors. This is almost all work that was done by TAC, bringing it up to date with the upstream Arduino version. And also what I did is shortened the list of root certificates. Fortuitously, there were some certificates that were decertified, and I took those out, though there's a nuance about that. But that caused it caused it now to be possible to use the updated stuff from TAC and to work properly. It was basically a storage issue that was holding things back. So this is now updated. I'll update some guides to point to the new version, and the next thing to do is to try to update the ESP IDF version to see if that also improves things. We still get like random crashes after a few hours in this firmware. See if we can improve that, and also see if I can reduce the amount of heap storage that is used when reading the certificates or in general. The other thing that I'm going to look at, but I haven't succeeded in doing yet is that when we updated ESP IDF on espresso boards to 5.3.2, it caused BLE on the ESP32C3 to boot loop, and I have not yet figured out what's going on with that after a couple of days of debugging. So that's on my agenda as well. Okay.
All right, thank you, Dan. Next up is Jeff, and after that, we will hear from Jerry.
Hello. So I added something to CircuitPython called supervisor.runtime.display for any board with display I/O. It's kind of going to be the new and improved successor to board.display, and it lets you do useful stuff like configure your display once in boot.py and then use it across multiple runs of code.py, even on a board which doesn't have a built-in display and therefore lacks board.display. And the reason that we did that right now was, with Scott's encouragement, it was a part of adding auto configuration of the digital video output on the Metro RP2350 and Feather RP2350, a pull request which has also been merged. Actually, those two were in the same pull request. We'll potentially add that to some more boards in the future. What they need to have hardware-wise for us to want to do that is a DVI connector or an HSTX ribbon cable connector and pull-ups on that I2C line. So there are a few other boards that can do this, but the Metro and the Feather RP2350 are kind of the ones where that's most useful. You've got plenty of RAM for the frame buffer and all that good stuff, and it works really well. If you plug it in to your computer and hit reset, the display just comes up. It's really nice. You can also configure some of the things like the resolution from your settings.toml file. Anyway, next up, on the Pi 5 in PIO matter, I've been laying some groundwork for a possible upcoming product, which would be a Raspberry Pi hat with 3 Hub 75 connectors. By having more than one connector, we can drive the same number of pixels at a higher refresh rate. But that's gonna involve adding more mapping modes, like the different ways that you can arrange the panels physically relative to how the frame buffer is arranged in memory. And so I'm setting the stage for allowing that code to be written in Python instead of in C++, because writing C++ is kind of a drag. And if you have a different way you've arranged your panels, in the future, you might be able to specify that with Python code instead of with C++ code, so you don't have to recompile anything, which would be great. What I'm actually up to right now, today, and probably for the rest of the week, is working in Arduino land on the RP2350, creating a library for digital video output using HSTX. I mentioned a library written by Michael Bell back in Hug Reports, and I'm basing an Arduino library off of that. The work in progress is progressing. It can show a video display, but there is a lot more stuff like 8-bit modes, maybe 1-bit modes, and then some reliability things that I was noticing. And that's what I'm up to.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Next up is Jerry, and after that is Scott.
There's that unmute. Yeah, so this actually goes back over the last several weeks, but been playing around trying to clean up and catch up on some issues that have been reported with the RFM9X and RFM libraries. And so that leads to some questions I put in the weeds. And then I've also just been playing around resurrecting some old projects with the OB5640 cameras on some Pico 2Ws and with ESP camera on the ESP32 S3 boards. So those have been fun, mostly just getting them back up and running after ignoring it for quite a while. All good stuff.
All right, thanks, Jerry. Next up, and rounding out the section, we will hear from Scott.
Hello. So I'm still in the Fruit Jam weeds. I need to polish up the Fruit Jam board definition so I can make a PR. I'm expanding supported HSTX frame buffer resolutions. So on my deep dive I did being able to quadruple pixels. And it turns out it actually makes the Python code run faster, which I thought was interesting. It just uses less memory transfer time, which is interesting. I've also found this resolution 720 by 400. It can run at stock speeds and is wider screen. It turns out it originates in like IBM PC text modes. So I think it's like quite well supported, and it looks a lot more square on my 1080p test TV anyway. I have to test USB host fixes that Tack's done. I'm hoping to get it solid. I just did try it and it still didn't enumerate, so unfortunately USB host is not working very well. So that's going to be the primary thing I want to do this week, because you can't really like make it cool until you can plug USB devices in. And then I was brainstorming terminal improvements for the Fruit Jam, so supporting emoji, and probably if I do that, moving the terminal font to the file system. This would shrink CircuitPython image firmware images, which would be great, but you would need just like a fallback mode if the fonts aren't available on the file system. But also potentially you could support larger languages that take a lot more characters, like Chinese, for example, if you had a giant file system. Also thinking about supporting foreground and background color in the terminal, and also was thinking about being able to do vertical scrolling, because when we queue up the HSTX, we write like a DMA plan, and we could just change which rows go when. That could make it easier to scroll the frame buffer, and it actually could help us work with scrolling on SPI displays as well. So that's something in the back of my brain too. And that's my brain dump for status.
Scott, and that is it for status updates. So next up is In the Weeds. In the Weeds is an opportunity for long-form discussions. These can either come out of status updates or be identified ahead of time. If you've got any topics that you'd like to discuss, go ahead and add those in the notes, and I will hand it over to Jerry to queue up the topic that's here.
Okay, yeah. So clearly, it's not a hot burning issue. It affects probably very few users, but it's kept me busy for quite some time, and a lot of time recently. So I thought I'd bring it up. There was a really long-standing issue. It goes back probably 3-4 years in the RFM9X library regarding some of the spreading factors, the non-standard ones, in particular the spreading factor 6 just never worked, and never just really, was a puzzle. So finally, after reading the data sheet, rereading the data sheet, I finally figured out what the problem was and fixed it. And so it actually works now in the RFM library. It added a fair amount of code. It had some new properties and add some new register, things. I forget what they're called, but whatever. So I did not implement it in the RFM9X library because I'm afraid it's going to make that library bigger and even be a bigger problem for the Feather M0 build. The RFM library won't run on any of the M0 boards because it requires async I/O, which I don't believe is built into any M0 boards. So I'm just looking for some guidance. Do people think it's worth putting this back into the RFM9X and absorbing it's probably tens of bytes. So, and again, it's only come up a few times. A few users over the past years have even questioned it. It doesn't work in the Radiohead Arduino library. It's not supported there. I reported to them what it took to fix it, and they said, "Oh, that's interesting. Well, we'll just document it doesn't work." And it's because it actually really screws up the reliable datagram mode, the changes that are needed. And, so it's very cumbersome to use. So I don't know if it's really worth fixing it in the RFM9X library. Curious what your thoughts are on that.
My suggestion. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say my inclination would be to just keep it in the RFM one, the newer library, essentially, and tell folks if they want to use it that the newer library is the one to use.
Yeah, that's fine with me, and I did put a PR in to put it in. It's actually put it in about 3 weeks ago, and hasn't gotten a whole lot of attention. Somebody did comment on it the other day with just a question that I answered. So the problem is there aren't a lot of people who are interested or probably have to test this. But it might be nice to if we can get that PR incorporated. It might be nice to get it out of the way. So that's fine with me. And so I've done is I've gone back to several of the issues that are in the RFM9X library and commented in them that this has been fixed in RFM but isn't here, and closed a bunch of other ones that I think have been languished too long. So yeah, and so with this, there were some other issues about spreading factors that worked out. Turns out all of them actually work, but you do have to tweak a whole bunch of different parameters to get them to work. It's not trivial. So that's more of a documentation thing than it is any bug fixes. So again, so if everyone's comfortable, we'll leave the 9X out of it if that's okay.
That's fine to me. My suggestion on the issue was just leave this open so people could chime in if they actually care. But
okay.
I think implementing everything that you can because you can is a bit of a trap. So I'd say wait until people need it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, the few people who brought it up, it's been some very specialized things. Maybe either people trying to do really long range, in which case they want the higher spreading factors, I believe, and those just require some real tweak. Those actually work. You just have to tweak the other timing parameters because the packets take so long to transmit. But the 6 is, I think, is for high speed, and it's tricky. You have to really fundamentally change the way packets are structured, and it breaks a bunch of other things. Just another offhand question. I think Jeff's answering it here, so maybe I don't need to even bring it up.
Yeah, thanks, Jerry. I will try to take a look at the PR as well. I've got a couple other things to do this afternoon, so I don't know if it will be
okay
this afternoon or tomorrow, but I will try to take a look as I've got some hardware. So if no one beats me to it, then I'll take
okay.
a look.
Again, and I appreciate just I figured I'd raise it just because it's been out there a couple of weeks. Yeah. But again, clearly nobody's looking for it either, so it's not a problem for anybody.
Yeah.
And then my last topic there was about the ESP camera, but I think I'm just trying to read Jeff's comments here. It's just I use it occasionally. I mean, I can make my own builds when I need to, but I was just curious as to how big an impact it would be to enable it.
It looks like at one point in time it wasn't fitting on a bunch of boards, and I went in and put disables just because at that moment we were interested in getting everything ready for the Memento, and if it happened to not fit, I wasn't going to spend time making it fit on a board that wasn't designed for a camera, and so that's what we ended up with. And in the meantime, we've probably enabled and disabled other modules and changed ESP IDF versions. And so if it happens to fit now without making some other trade-off, and you're interested in making a pull request, please be my guest. Those weren't, each individually turned off because it was a good idea, but just because at one moment in time it didn't fit, and I wanted to get the build to be green. So that's basically what I can piece together of the history today.
All right. Well,
I would also say BLE doesn't fit on those 4 megabyte boards, but it will fit in CircuitPython 10. So this is something that we can turn on for CircuitPython 10 for sure.
Right. These boards are specifically weird because they have smaller partitions for CircuitPython in order to fit 2 of them for OTA. So our plan is in CircuitPython 10 and in a newer version of TinyUF2 to actually remove OTA so that we can fit larger CircuitPython images that then CircuitPython 10 will require for these 4 megabyte S3 boards. So we should enable BLE and ESP camera then for CircuitPython 10.
I'll take I'll take a look again when I'm playing with them again and see, if you think it's worth turning them on. But again, it's not a big deal. It's easy enough for me to make a custom build when I need one. I've just been using it on the 4 MB flash, 2 MB PS RAM, both that and the TFT, the ones with the TFTs on them. But it's I couldn't remember the history as to why it wasn't there. But okay. Oh, one other question, but I was thinking about it. A long time ago, I tried it on an ESP32S2 ESP camera, and it totally failed. And there was a note there basically saying that S2 is kind of a pain once you use the S3. Has there been any more look at that? Should it work on the S2s?
I really don't know. At one point in the history of Memento, I feel like there was a version with the S2 and we found problems, and again, the fastest way forward was to put an S3 on the board. And I think there were some other advantages of the S3. At a low level, I think they have different peripherals that are talking to the camera, but I don't have any of those details just in my head. It's possible that by updating the ESP32 camera submodule, we would get bug fixes, or it's possible it's a bug that we have. I don't know the details. As an Adafruit person, it's not a spot where we're likely to spend our time right now.
Okay, so that's really the bottom. You'd rather just ignore the S2.
Yeah, we don't have a product that we are selling that has that combination of hardware, except maybe the Coluga dev kit. But honestly, I don't know why you'd be using that combination of hardware. It had some severe limitations even when it worked. So I know there are boards out there, but they're not Adafruit products, and so we're not likely to spend a lot of time developing that.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Jerry, as well as everyone else who chimed into the discussion. And with that, I will take the last time stamp, and give you the wrap up. So also, I will say a belated hug report, whoever put the time for next week's meeting. I appreciate it. So I will mention that here in a minute. As a reminder, this meeting that you're listening to now, has been CircuitPython Weekly for February 18th, 2025. Thank you to everyone who participated. If you would like to support Adafruit and CircuitPython, and those of us that work on CircuitPython, consider purchasing hardware from the Adafruit shop at adafruit.com. As a reminder, the video of this meeting will get released on YouTube at youtube.com/Adafruit, and the podcast will be made available on other major podcast services. It will also get featured in the Python and Microcontrollers newsletter, which you can visit adafruitdaily.com to subscribe to that. The next meeting will be held on Monday, as usual, at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time. That is February 24th, next week on Monday. As always, we're on the Adafruit Discord. You can join at any time, adafru.it/Discord. If you'd like to get notified about the meeting and any changes to the day or time, you can ask to be added to the CircuitPythonistas role on Discord. So that's it for this week. Thank you for everyone who attended, and we hope to see you all next week.